Hey everyone, welcome back. Nice to see your returning faces. This is, I don't even know at this point, part 5, I think, in the summer webinar series for TIA. So, if you're new to this, this is a program that Carolyn helped spin up. Really, we started hearing many of you having changes in your summer plans and realizing that you could start to spend a bit more time on your ventures going into the year. So the idea here was like, hey, what are some basic skills, things that you could learn now that you could start applying immediately to your ventures that would help you move the ball downfield a bit more. We talked about TIA mindset, networking, building surveys and discovering more about your customers, creating and testing simulations, hacks, MVPs, and then today we're talking about a team. I'm guessing some of you are kind of one-man bands right now, solo operators on your ventures. A few of you will be starting in the incubator this fall with a team. That's great. Our hope is that by the end of this year, all of you have built teams, not just for the sake of having a team, but for the benefits that it brings and for the skills that you'll learn along the way about how to build a team and probably also how not to build the team. Shav joining us to talk about team. He's touched every piece of the TIA program, from the incubator to the 200 level to the Entrepreneurs Fund over the summer. He has alums and parents, I'm sure, that have invested in his business. He's worked with really impressive artists that you would know, musicians that you'd know very, very well by name. And he's gone through kind of all the stages of team building. The lows, the highs. I think we're lucky to be catching him right now at a high, but look forward to hearing a bit more about the lows as well. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but Shav is just, he was in your shoes not too long ago, and since then he's built a really impressive company, an impressive team, and they're truly changing the landscape of how music and musicians and artists create their work. Which I'm guessing all of us have in some way already experienced. And I attribute a large part of that to the team that he's built. So with that, really excited to introduce Shav to you all. He's going to walk us through some of his learnings, and then we'll reserve some time at the end here to do some Q&A. So Shav, you have the floor, and thank you.
Thank you, Wills. I will jump onto this screen share. Let me know if you can see everything. Yep. Okay, cool. So yeah, Wills, I appreciate the very kind intro. If it weren't for Wills and it weren't for TIA, I wouldn't be getting to basically live the dream, which is what I get to do on a daily basis in New York City. Indify is a music data company that uses an algorithm to predict which artists are going to basically do well in the future. And so we use data from YouTube, SoundCloud, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify. And, we've gone through a few different changes. Started at when we pitched TIA at TIA 5 years ago. And it was a crazy panel. It was Jessica Alba, MC Hammer, the president of BuzzFeed, the CEO of Warby Parker, and the CEO of the Rent the Runway. Wills can attest. I was backstage, trying to go to the bathroom because I thought I had to throw up, and they were just miking me up, and they were all right, you got to go on stage and do this, and I was staunchly refusing. So it was a pretty chaotic scene. And then we did our thing, and somehow it worked out, and Indify got between the E-Fund and the grants, $25,000 to start the company. And that was 2 weeks before we graduated. So coming out of school, me and my co-founders, who were Matt and Connor Lawrence, two friends of mine from home, Matt being technical, who was our CTO and had built a bunch of stuff for local pizza shops growing up, and also worked in e-commerce internships, and Connor, who was on the media side between Time and Viacom and Complex. Us three kind of very fortunately fit together like glue. And It was October 2015 when Matt built the first like fully working version with like 40,000 artists of Indify, where it would basically comb through YouTube, SoundCloud, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, and rank these artists. And Connor, who was sort of like our in-house analyst, who would also do editorial to tell the stories of the artists on the platform, he was like, "Hey, you should check out this artist, Kai, Kai exclamation point on the platform. He's number 50 something, but really organic data, really like cool stuff, but very like raw and kind of simple at that time." And so, I mean, the whole kind of premise of Indify, the reason we wanted to start the why was like, really artists were being signed based on like who they knew, like whether it was like nepotism of some family member in the music industry, whether it was getting onto some blog, which was, can you imagine, like no emerging artists were on Spotify back then. It was just SoundCloud, and people were basically just getting on these blogs written by 17-year-olds, and that's how they're being signed for millions of dollars. Even like some of your favorite artists like The Weeknd, they blew up in like a blog era, or Drake or Chance the Rapper. um, and wow, I feel old that was like a come up story, and that people here were probably like in like middle school and that happened. That's crazy. Um, but or high school. But I think what's really cool is, we built something that helped identify people based on the talent of their work. And we found this artist, Kai. And so we get on the phone with him, and he's like, "I'm 17. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I'm recording on my cell phone. I'm basically like getting bullied in school. Like I'm planning on being a music like teacher, and that's kind of it." And we were like, "Hey, like we think you're amazing. Like we're going to support you no matter what you do. Like we think you could be like an amazing artist." And we were like, "Do you know anybody in the music industry?" And he at that point really didn't know anybody. And so we tried to help, and we ended up helping him get a piece on Pigeons and Planes, which is one of the big blogs. It would almost be like the equivalent of getting like New Music Friday back then. And there's 15 artists on there. They're all like, we put all their data there. And so, we end up actually getting a lot of reach out from the industry, because they see us, because the audience kind of the industry is on this piece, or like looks at this publication. But Kai ended up moving. He went to Atlanta for a bit. He met his manager, which is such an important step in his journey when he built his team, and he changed his name to Khalid. And once he met his manager, and once he assembled his team, and changing his name to Khalid was just happened to be part of that, he, like, I'm sure many of you know, like became one of the biggest artists in the world, and is still a really close friend of ours. But Indify really got its stake by being known for predicting and discovering him early. And so what happened from there is, honestly, and it's ironic that, and I'm very grateful to be doing especially this topic, but like to be here in general, but um, what we've done in the last few years is, we started to see that we would put these articles out about artists, and all of these labels, Atlantic, Interscope, Capital, RCA, would subscribe to like look at our picks and our discoveries. And we would even drive bidding wars for artists. Like I remember with Juice World, we helped like drive his deal up significantly. But what ended up happening is, the whole purpose is to empower artists. The whole, biggest value for us is artists first always. And what we started to figure out is, there'd be artists like Khalid that existed that didn't find that right manager, that didn't find that right A&R. And really, in the last few years, we pivoted the platform to be not just a discovery tool, but a connections marketplace. So these funding partners, people who could be a valuable member to artist teams, managers, lawyers, agents, they can come on our platform now and not just discover these artists that are on here, but they can actually message them and connect with them. And then they can actually do a deal with them right on the platform that's fair and transparent, kind of like a safe note in tech that makes it really easy and simple for an artist to partner with a team member. And the reason we did that is because what we started to find is that of the artists on our rank, there would be the same manager behind certain artists. Of the artists that were like, performing, there would be the same digital marketers behind them. There would be the same lawyers behind them. And what you started to see is that it wasn't enough to have great music. It was incredibly important to have a great team. And I think that, to me, just even talking on the music side, stresses how important it is to have a great team. Like you could have had a Khalid in El Paso, but the question really remains, if he did not meet the team members that he met, that he was very fortunate to kind of work with, would he be where he's at today? And how many more Khalids are there out there that haven't met their team, that have an amazing product. And I think it's actually super similar to tech, where, you know, you can have an amazing idea, you can have something that's built incredibly well, but if you're not able to assemble the right team around that, whether it's fundraising, whether it's just building on a day-to-day basis on the product side, whether it's chemistry and setting the right tone for the office or team that you're in, or it's really just even like the day-to-day work that you have to get done, like not having the right team could slow you down 6 months, it could slow you down 12 months. And in often cases, I think CB Insights said 23%, which is like almost a fourth of startups that fail because they don't have the right team, and 13% because there's disharmony between the team or between the investor base. And I think those are really telling statistics. Like, whether it comes to when you go into a fundraising pitch, they're not only checking your metrics, they're checking your ability to add to your team and who's on your team. Whether you go into a business pitch, that's the same thing they're checking. And I think, I find a lot of similarities between the artist experience and the founder experience. And I found in both, teams are extremely pivotal in making sure that you can get to the next stage. And I have a little bit of a table of contents here of like vision, mission, values, finding founders, the long game, growing your team, and inspiring your team. The one that doesn't like as directly relate that you might ask is, why is the first thing here vision, mission, values? Like, didn't we already talk about this in another seminar? Why is this guy who's supposed to talk about team like talking about vision, mission, values? No, this is not a typo. I think that every team starts with your vision, mission, and values. And so I gave a little bit of context, just examples as to how Indify frames these things. Our vision is to help every artist achieve their potential. And this is like, your vision is like, what long-term do you want to do to change and make an impact in the world? Your mission is more near term, like the next year or so, like how can you mobilize your team to specifically be actionable around these goals? So for us, it's to connect artists with the funding partners needed to build sustainable careers. They're funding team members, like people who can put strategic capital in, similar to an angel investor. We want to be the angel investing platform for music. And values, what are the core principles your team / product exemplifies? To me, this one is something that is said every single day at Indify. It's core to us, it's bigger than us, and it's artists first always. And so when we think about artists first always, everything in our company is governed by this. And to have these values and to have this mission and vision is so important, because not only are you going to look at external team members and say, or not only are you going to look at internal team members and say, like, are we embodying this on a day-to-day basis? Like, not only are you going to look at day-to-day decisions and say, hey, I'm not sure if we want to do this. Let me go back to our rubric and say, is this artist first always? Which is how we always kind of make decisions. Not only is the person that you're not in the room with, that you're working with, have a rubric here to make decisions off of when you're not there, but when it comes to hiring, when it comes to talent, I've found from experience in hiring, so many people, like over probably 20 people between part-time and full-time in the last few years, that the people that can at least qualify for the work, but really are mission focused and really care about the values of the company, those are the people that you want to hire. And I think that connective tissue is what makes something not just a startup or a company, but an organism, something with life, something with spirit, something with a perspective. And those things are bigger than us. And when I find talking to potential employees or employees is, actually people are looking for something bigger than them. People want to make an impact that's bigger than them. And to just chase, metrics or capital return is usually not how the most important startups or companies are made. And so this next part, my bad, that's my email. Hold up. See, I'm still an old man when it comes to technology. Anyways, so the next thing is finding founders. So when it comes to building your team, you can see on the right by this picture that when it really works, it's like a puzzle piece like being completed by this amazing illustration here that I found on the internet of stick figures, that many more are coming, don't worry. I find that your co-founder team and your founding team, it's one of the most important parts of your journey, your startup, the enjoyment you have. And in many ways, it's much deeper than just a typical working relationship. And something that I've never taken for granted and I've been lucky for. I've grown up with my co-founders since like fourth grade. I've known one of them, and we were best friends in high school. And you know, as big as doing Indify is, and as big as doing a company is, our friendship and our trust ran way deeper than that. You know, we've been with each other through thick and thin, through common spats and issues versus like high moments on a friend level forever. Now I think of it more as a family level, because when it comes to being a founder, it's like it's like having a sibling. It's like being married in ways, and it's like having a much deeper relationship than you expect, because you're doing something that is bigger than you together. You're tackling challenges that are bigger than you. You're generally having to go the extra mile and really kind of harp in. And this is where founder trust and having people you trust is probably one of the most important things that I would look for when it comes to finding a co-founder. The disharmony point is really important, and trust goes, I think, as well to like just how well do you mesh. And I don't mean like how much do you like this person, or do you want to just hang out with this person all the time. I don't think that's actually necessarily always a positive signal. I think it's how well do you work together. Is there a mutual sense of respect? Is there trust together? Is there a level of honesty? Is there communication? These things are as important as the skill sets. But with that comes, like I was just saying, sometimes the person you want to hang out with all day is not necessarily the person that's the best co-founder for you. I find that, with my CTO, we butt heads a lot. And if you actually look at Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen, I think they talk about how they don't like, I read a quote that like Ben Horowitz was like, I don't even want to hang out with Mark like on a weekend or whatever. But I think if you look at their track record, they've built the most successful venture firm of all time. I think what you see is the advantages of different perspectives and the advantages of different thinking, the advantages of being able to build with someone that's smarter than you at something else. And so, the three-step process I kind of gave there is identify the gap in your business, look through your network or online, and then share your idea and read the room. I personally, I think we know a lot of the answers internally better than we think we do. And I think a lot of times you have to trust your instincts and trust how that feeling of, is this chemistry right? And I find that reading the room, when you share the idea, how does this person react? How does this person make you feel? How does this person intuitively understand or not understand this problem? They're not going to intuitively not understand or understand it that much more when you hire them. Obviously, from actually showing them, like they might, but to have somebody that has something that clicks with them, that they're really inspired by, that they really love these values, and that being like the first level of like finding founders. That also has a skill set that's completely different than you, and maybe again like doesn't personally mesh as well, but like is definitely something that like professionally meshes. Like I would always be careful to be humble and have humility when looking at like hiring somebody, to say, hey, is this just me wanting to hang out with this person, or is this someone that really like on a technical level, or from like whether it comes to the business side or whether it comes to the technology side, like really complements my skill set. The long game. So I found that, or I find a lot, and I think this with artists, I think this with founders. I've been working on Indify for 5 years. We just recently raised a $3 million plus round from Initialized Capital, led by like Alexis Ohanian, who is at the firm, who founded Reddit. And even now, after this round, we're still figuring it out. And Wills will tell you, we're still like trying to nail product market fit. We're still trying to get traction. We're still trying to do the small things, and it's taken us 5 years. So, I don't underestimate ever. And when I see even Khalid's journey, who blew up really fast, it took him 3 years, and every year was growth, and every year was a different point. When I look at different artists, it takes time. And I think that's okay. And I think it's okay to acknowledge now that if this works, if this does go where you think it's going to go, which is hopefully like, changing the world and having an impact on society, or having an impact on, for us artists, then it's going to take a long time. And it's been 5 years for us. And what we've gotten into now, is something I actually dreamt of getting into 5 years ago, but never believed or thought that we'd actually be here, but we are. And I think it's important to acknowledge that when you are creating a team, when you are putting something together, it's taking time. And so sometimes, you might need to think about the next few years and make moves in the next few years that won't work in 5. Sometimes you might need to, um, you know, you might need to think about who you're hiring in terms of like, what is the impact of this person, like in the long run. But the other thing is like, when you start working with someone, you don't necessarily need to rush into these agreements. You don't need to rush into any of these conversations on the technical level. I'm just sharing them with you because I found it to be a really important point of mentorship for me. Um, but this stuff doesn't need to come right out the gate. I just think like it's important to be aware. And even when you do have those technical conversations on like, hey, what are our agreements going to look like? I think it's important to be aware that this is a long-term thing. This is a long game. If this works, we're all going to win over time, and we all should be here this full time and contribute the work over time for it to be kind of meaningful. And so there's 3 concepts that, these are high level concepts or more technical concepts that maybe it's too deep to get into, but I felt like just from a responsibility perspective, it's important to share. Because if you do go into agreements, it's important to kind of have these things in mind. One is, if this game is going to take twice as long and be twice as hard, and I'm sure that Wills and Andy have said that a million times to you, like they did to us back in the day, and that's something that's always stuck with me. The idea of building that into the agreements is super important. So vesting is a concept where, let's say you have 2-year vesting. Every year you're going to get 1/24th, or every month you're going to get 1/24th of your equity until those 2 years are up. And honestly, like we've revested a lot over rounds because people want to make sure that you're still working to get your equity. It doesn't really like matter if everybody's committed long term, but for people who might leave after a few months, like you want to make sure that you have a setup that is situated in a way that they're not necessarily taking benefits of people who are giving a lot more work longer term. Then the other idea is part of that is a cliff. So most companies have 4-year vesting and 1-year cliffs. Like if you have a friend that works at a startup, that's their option package, almost like 99% of the time. And the 1-year cliff is a really important thing too. It's like if you leave after a few months and you didn't really contribute, should you even get any equity? And that's how a lot of founders think about this. Like this is such a long-term game, and I think that's a super important perspective to have. And then when it comes to splits, like again, like don't rush into it. Don't I wouldn't say like jump into those things just out the gate. Like work with somebody, get a feel for it, see where we're at, and really let things play out. But what I've come to find is like, and I said, like everybody kind of goes through the unimaginable together. It's honestly, like when it comes to this type of stuff, the important thing is that everybody just feels okay with where they're at, because if it works, everybody is going to do well. And I think it's important to have like, oftentimes, like I find that like agreements where you're doing, 50-50, or if it's 2 founders or whatever, nobody really tends to be mad at that because they realize the work is just insane, like across the board. Because if it works, you're going to be having to go the extra mile. You're going to be having to kind of go over and above. And it's definitely a hard and lonely kind of process for everybody who's involved as being a founder. And growing your team, I think it's super important to think about values, like we mentioned. That's going to be determining what are the decisions made when you're not in the room. So if this person embodies those values, then you can be sure that like the company is going to work without you. I think have a team of like 11 people, maybe soon to be 12, that I can't necessarily be in the room at all. I'm like at this point just trying to make sure my fingerprints are on everything I can, but it's bigger than me, which is an awesome and scary feeling. But I'm so confident in the values of our team, and I'm so confident in how inspired they are by the artist first always message. And when we do things like what we call the artist story time, where artists come to speak with us every week, that I don't worry when I'm not in the room, because I know that they are thinking in the same way that I am, which is artist first always, and making the decision for the artist. And if they're doing that, it could be whatever decision, I know it's the right one. So that for us is, as a company, like our spirit in our life. And it's also like, I find that people who care about the mission will go the extra mile. Sometimes you have to work weekends. Sometimes you have to work through nights. Like it gets crazy, and you need people that are willing to do that if you're willing to do that. And I think that people who have those values are willing to not just look at this as like a 9 to 5, but like put in the extra work and care about something and really like go the distance. So I think um, that's super important. I think when you're thinking about like not just adding founders, but adding employees to the team. And the second thing, and this is like, concepts that Wills and Andy have definitely taught me, and this stick figure on the right, I'll explain where my head's at with it. Um, hire fast, fire fast. So one thing we say a lot is action over inaction. I think it might come from Amazon's principles, which is like, honestly, I find that oftentimes trying to be great prevents a lot of good, and it prevents a lot of good in the short term, where you need to be constantly moving and you need to be constantly deciding. But inaction is a decision. Like, to not do something is the decision to not do anything. And so that's something that I've learned is like, if you can get something done, oftentimes that's better than procrastinating the problem. And so this here is me running around New York City alone trying to get these SaaS clients, these record labels. Wills is smiling because he knows that I've been, basically like selling data for a long time. But we hired a business person recently, and I know that Wills and Andy have been pushing me to do so earlier. I probably, I think it's always tough to adjust for funds, but I know that we could have really benefited from having that earlier. And, oftentimes people describe startups as jumping out of a plane and building the parachute on the way down. And I think oftentimes when you think about hiring, it's the same thing. But like with hiring, you hiring that person 3 months earlier and being able to close X more deals and being able to have somebody that's closing deals. The thing about a business hire, and Wills and Andy had always said that, is that they're adding value. And then if they're not, and this is the tough part, right, is like, if it's not working out between you and an employee or you and a team member, and that, and you're the decision maker, and you kind of have to make a decision there, it's a disservice not only to yourself but to that person to continue the relationship. And the way I think about it is, it's a disservice to artists in my case. It's a disservice to that cohort of people that you're trying to change their lives. Like, holding on to somebody that maybe isn't right won't allow them to grow. It won't allow you to grow. And if you're not growing and you're not taking every shot to put things over the line, that could be the difference between you creating a better world for artists or whoever you're servicing, and not. And so procrastinating, the truth is a lie. That's a Shav original. I'm proud of that one. I'm going to start using that at the office. But basically, like, I think, if you are really not acting on something that should happen, and again, like, trusting your own compass and your own values and mission, I think is super important in this. If you aren't, I think ultimately you are delaying and lying to yourself and to the team that you have, not just yourself and that specific person, but you have a team of people that are trusting that you're going to do the right thing, and a group of an audience, whether it's artists or whoever, those people are going to be looking to you to make sure you do the right thing. And I think, oftentimes it's the hard thing, but it's the right thing. And so finally, and this is kind of probably more of a theme that I was talking about, really thinking about those values, thinking about that part that's bigger than you, thinking about the mission, thinking about what drives you and what can drive your team. It's so important. And I've come to learn it so much more now today, 5 years later. You think that this stuff is propaganda, or you're just saying it or whatever, but I think the idea that you have something that people can rally behind, a message, is what people are looking for, and it's how it is the fuel in the tank of the team. It's what drives people forward. It's what keeps people coming in. It's what keeps people going the extra mile. And Ben Horowitz has said, nothing motivates a great employee more than a mission that's so important it supersedes everyone's personal ambition. Again, like, to make money is not as important as to make change. And I think that's something that sounds corny when it's coming out of my mouth right now, but I actually think it's so important. And I found that it's such a valuable perspective to have. When people think about Indify, and I'm really, really proud of this, whether it's in the industry, whether it's artists, whether it's Wills or Andy, investors, whoever it is, almost to a fault, and we get criticism for it, it's artists first always. And as the industry moves towards artist leverage, as the the world becomes more artist centric, and as Spotify and the ecosystem creates this 99% of artists, to be the place that artists go first, where they trust you, is not only, I think, a really powerful, positive place to be, but it's a smart business decision long term. And I think that's, for me, like where this stuff kind of bridges the gap. And I think the everlasting question is like, what I love in the next generation and talking to a lot of younger people is this idea that we can build stuff that is valuable, but it's going to have a positive impact. And I think we're really proud that we're an artist first always company, and we've had an impact on the lives of artists that many of which you've probably heard, and soon now, and this is with Pink Sweats as a new artist that we worked with. We helped him assemble the funding team, the funding partners, the right partners for him. We've done it with 20 artists, and in a big way, a big part of what Indify does today is help people assemble teams. And the love that we get back for those artists is on a different level than the artists we predicted. So it's clearly something that is really valuable, and I definitely am here to help answer any questions, especially now. I don't know, Liz, if you want to jump into that about how to build a team, or questions on teams in general.
I'd love to leave it open to the group if anybody has any burning questions to start. Thank you, Shav.
Yeah.
I have a question. So everybody's at home right now during the summer. They have some ventures that they're going to work on this year. They have visions, I'm guessing, that'll evolve. What can they start doing relative to team today?
Yeah. I think I'm glad you mentioned that. There's a few tools that I wanted to mention that I didn't. I think one, spending time with yourself and just being really clear about what are you missing? In many ways, I think as a founder, you're an architect, and you're architecting this machine that, in the best and truest sense, you're not needed in it. And I'm learning that more and more today as I'm getting less and less needed by my team. But essentially, what I'm really proud of is that things are working on their own. We have a business lead, a product lead, a kind of artist and community lead, a technical lead, and we're getting a design lead. And all of these people, I think those 5 should kind of take over a lot of the responsibilities for the day-to-day of the company. And then I can start to do what I'm good at, which is inspiring people to want to invest on the platform and work with artists on the platform, and finding clients there, finding investors for the company, and just really telling the story and inspiring the team. I think being really clear right now about what you're good at and what you need is super important. And actually, you can never really take enough time to get that right. But then once you do, and you're like, hey, I need a technical founder, that is what I need, where do you go, right? I actually think, in our own networks, and it might just be posting on socials, or it might be kind of going to the university groups that you're in, or high school groups, and saying hey, I'm doing this, would love to see who would want to be a part of it. And I wouldn't be too precious with your ideas. I actually think the idea is kind of meaningless, to be honest. It's going to change, it's going to adapt. So share your idea, see if people connect with it, and put it up there. As well as tools like AngelList is a super kind of important tool for Indify's history for hiring great talent, as well as meetup.com, when people were actually meeting up, was great. I don't know if they're doing more virtual stuff right now, but I find that sometimes just going into a room of people with common interests, you really just connect with people more than you think. So those are places that I think you can find good team members. And I think, being okay to trusting your network, or trusting people that are similar to where you're from or whatever. I think that's good and bad in ways, but I think starting there is never the worst.
Questions from the group. Stop being shy. I'm sure there's thoughts in your heads. Turn on your videos. Join us.
Yeah, I have one
question.
Could you speak to trying to get someone on your team when you don't have money, per se? You're not creating revenue, you're not generating revenue, but how do you incentivize someone to join your team when there's no like monetary incentive?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so ironic to me, and I think about this a lot. Um, I think the greatest challenges you face as an entrepreneur is when you have the least. So when you actually start out and you don't have revenue and you don't have backing and you don't have funding and generally like nobody believes in you, like that's actually when you have to do the most, which is like you have to actually create a product from scratch. You have to like, you know, build the foundation of it and hire your first team members and convince them to join. So it's like, I feel for you. I remember those days. I think the mission is super important. Even today, you know, we're hiring senior talent at a crazy price, you know, because we want senior talent and we want them to be as part of the team. They're taking huge cuts just because even now, like, you know, even after you raise all this money, it's not really nothing compared to Google or Amazon or whoever you're competing against. The mission really like speaks above all. I think you have to inspire people, and you know, in many cases, when it's a founder, it's important that they feel like they have ownership. I think that's a key thing. Is like, hey, like, you know, building trust with them that there's going to be either a time when you take care of them on a equity level, or b you know, just the belief that like I believe in this bigger than me, and this is a picture that's bigger than me. Like there is a real economic value to um, the mission and values of your company. And I think that's like why it's so important to get those right and like to believe in them and to like think 5 steps ahead and connect the dots in reverse. Like for us, 5 years ago when we started, we imagined the world like it is today, where like everyone was kind of using data to find artists. Paint that picture, you know, don't be afraid to go there, don't be afraid to be bold and to believe, because like those things will eventually make the difference and are just inherently what you need to get somebody to want to work with you before there's actual like money in the door. And that's going to be the case with a lot of people here. So yeah, I think really think about, it's why I stress it so much. There's a real inherent value in knowing where you want to go and being confident about it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Who here is going to leave with a question that they wish they had asked?
I have a question. It's not really
Yeah.
a long answer, but did you start as an individual or did you start with a partner?
I started with partners. So, you know, I think initially I had come up with the concept. It has evolved since quite a bit. And the first few people I spoke to were just my best friends from high school. I was very lucky on the team side. I had 2 people with me and another helping from Colgate that all like were just around me and friends. And so like Matt on the technical end, I think finding a technical counterpart to non-technical founders, you know, I think that's actually super, super massive. Like a lot of people, some people try to outsource the tech. And I think it's just like, that's like a temporary Band-Aid that's honestly going to lead to a bigger wound down the road, because you're going to build tech debt and then you're not going to have the right people in-house that understand the tech to fix it. So having a technical founder was huge. And then Connor being able to storytell on top of that, it was a very, you know, Matt was our technical founder, Connor is our chief marketing officer. It was just like a very fortunate trio. And for me, I would just handle more on the business side. So I'd say for me, like it was very fortunate. I just had 2 people that were kind of the right fit for this out of the gate, and we all had a mutual love for music. It's part of the reason we were friends, and that's where I think sometimes starting within your network is not the worst thing. I'll ask a question that nobody had asked, but just to keep moving, like, what is it like working with people you know versus people you don't know? I think there's like, for example, like I can speak on working with friends, like my best friends. It it actually like has always been easier, and I always was worried about it, but it's always been, I think, better than not working with friends, in the sense that like I pretty much have fun every day. Still 5 years later, they're like my best friends, and we just get to hang out, and we have an office in New York. It's just pretty absurd, when you think about it. But then also like I had mentioned, like the trust is bigger than us. You know, like we know that none of us are going to, all of us are going to look out for each other, and I think that's always been really big, and it gets tested, but for us, that bond is so strong that it was never in question. So I think there is an advantage to working with people that you trust and friends, but there's also the disadvantages of, that then they're not going to look at you maybe as seriously in some cases. But I think for the most part, like working within your network or like people is actually sometimes better. And I've read about this on Y Combinator and stuff too. Like if you really know someone and can trust them and like kind of have a good feel for who they are, sometimes that's a really good, safer bet than someone that you're just starting to build a relationship with. Yeah.
I have a question. My name is Christina, and I'm wondering what strategies you have for keeping people accountable that are on your team, and then also just keeping it fun and light and make sure everyone's having a good time.
It's a really good question. And I'll explain some of the mistakes. I know Will's talked about failures that I've made. There've been times, especially coming out of like more recent rounds, where I've been like, we got to go. Like, it's a scary game. It's like, you got to hit certain numbers or else you're not going to survive type thing, and it's like, you want to be clear about what numbers you want to hit. But I became so numbers driven that I started to, I think, build in the wrong incentives. And that's probably why right now in this moment, I'm super preaching the idea of values, because I'm relearning the idea of values. And I think things are not black or white. You're not valueless or valueful. You're generally on a spectrum, I think, between like, core business monetary metrics and values. And I think for me, it's been a constant adjustment of, okay, we're going too far on this end, need to come back and make sure that like people are having fun. And like, so, I would not underestimate the value of fun. On the accountability side, I think there's clarity and I think an understanding probably even for you all and like how to do that. Like, you create clear expectations. We have a thing called Notion, which I highly recommend, honestly. It's basically like a note-taking platform where like our whole company is part of it. And we take meeting notes and it's all open to the whole company. And then you can put action items at the end and you can assign people. And when people don't complete the action items, it's like all right there. And so that's something that for me, it's like as a CEO of a business that's like 12 people deep, like I can just go on there and see the whole company. Slack tends to be a mess, but we have our like each team is on there, their KPIs, their mission, their own like kind of mini values and things. And I get to see who's actually reaching out to artists. Like you want to create tracking for your company internally to get anywhere. But at the same time, you have to understand that there's things that are deeper than metrics, which is like, for example, we helped this artist find a manager recently, and we're going to be cut into that deal. But what we've done is this thing called Artist Story Time, where every Friday an artist comes and talks to the whole team about just their experience with Indify, their experience trying to build in general. Man, like we've had people get emotional in that. The words that Jess Benko, this artist who's amazing, you should all check her out, was saying like about Indify. She was like, I was not doing anything before Indify, and then I spoke with Connor, and Connor helped put me in touch with my manager, and now I have a team, and now this is like a real shot at the living. And like everybody is going to go harder. Everybody is going to smile that day. Everybody is going to be excited to come the next week. And I think any sort of, we actually stopped doing it as a story times for a little bit, just because there's a lot of extra work that was coming in, and I could sense the fatigue in the team. And so things like that, like they're not like having fun, creating like moments around celebrating wins. Like we're going to have the ability to do the deals on platform. We're going to do like a whole event around that. Like, and we've done like kind of silly things before. Like we'll order pizza or like cakes or something when we were in the office. We're trying to figure out how to do it offline, but we do virtual team lunch every Friday where there's no work talk. We just kind of talk about random stuff or like play like games online or whatever. Those things go a long way. And I think balancing driving towards metrics with sprinkled in activities that are fun, that are like consistent, that are there to have fun is an art. It's really an art, and it's a very tricky thing. And I think it's a thing that's really important for founders to do between founders and between like a bigger team too.
Thanks.
Yeah. actually add to that. Like, I think, there's something that, and it's still early for you all, but I have seen, like, it's very easy to burn out, and like it's going to take so long, and like, oh, I'm sure a lot of people in TIA will drop out by the middle of the year. As I understand, TIA wills, like a lot of people do, and don't make it the whole way. And like, I think it's important to balance. That balance is super important towards like making something sustainable. Again, like just stuff around your mission and value. So I really like that question.
Shav, I have a question that's related to the current virtual work environment that we're in right now. What do you think are the opportunities and the challenges that poses for our student entrepreneurs who are just starting to build their teams?
I think what we just talked about is, again, I really like that because it's something that we're building in virtually, and it's been a little bit weirder. It's like, when you do a virtual team lunch, it's like, it's just funny. But then you get used to it, and you do the story time, and you get used to it. And we were doing those in person, and it was different. It actually transitioned like this virtually. So I think like building in, moments for the team to connect and be centralized. The other thing that we do is daily stand-ups. Every day at 11, we speak with each other, and everyone gives a short update, like a couple sentences on like, hey, yesterday I worked on this, today I'm working on this, and I'm blocked by from this person, or I have no blockers. And we do that every single day. And I don't think we would have gotten through this without that. I think that's a super important, just heartbeat. Like every day we check in and we talk about what we're working on. And then every day people can see into what other people are doing. So those are the problems that, we're addressing and probably exposing. The idea that, visibility, inter-team, unity, and a feeling of camaraderie, and then consistency. Those are things that definitely suffer from the virtual world. I've found in the first 2-3 months, especially of kind of the meta work environment, is I excelled because I'm very warm and I think welcoming to the team when I'm in the office. So I think that gets taken advantage of at times. Like people are like, hey, Shav, I have a question about this. Could you help me with this? Like whatever, a million different things. I'm never going to say no. Something I'm learning to do better. But when we were in kind of the home environment and everything was on my own time, with Notion, as long as I was documenting it so people could see, I was communicating with 12 people at once. That's to me the power of Notion, which is again like the note-taking platform that's like a centralized database. You're creating asynchronous methodologies to become way more efficient and do asynchronous work, as well as creating more time for deep work when you're kind of trusting that the team is there. And so I think one of the things I would suggest, so that's a positive that I've found, is like I actually have more time to do the deep work, to do the day-to-day stuff and not be bothered, not be interrupted, which is like super sometimes like debilitating if you're like really inside something and like you now have to like, and for me, I have trouble with focus anyways. So I think the important thing is you do want to have a regular cadence of checking in on metrics as well. Because if you're all kind of sporadic, it's important to be measuring things more from a measured standpoint. And I think actually that can help a lot of teams become more outcome oriented versus like, just culture oriented, because culture is one thing, but you also need people that produce the results. Yeah, Initialize actually did a really good seminar going into remote work and talked about, they had a few companies that had already been remote come and speak with us. And that's a lot of what they talked about. So not just my thinking there.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
I have a question.
Yeah.
First, thanks for all the introduction and there's a background of what you're doing. I think it's pretty impressive you made it this far.
Thank
like,
you.
start early.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Speaking about early startup stuff, you mentioned you had a technical member of your team going in early and you had a multi-person team.
Yes.
So I find myself in a situation wherein I am the only founder and I also have to take care of both the technical and the business aspects of it. Would you suggest that hiring technical talent early versus hiring business talent early is has a higher return of investment per se, or should I be focusing more on maximizing the current productivity I can do for myself and then look into hiring based on what I need?
I think actually, like, to this whole point, like, your happiness and your day-to-day feelings with what you're doing, yours specifically, matter a lot. And same as your co-founders, right? And in order to really achieve that, it's important to be clear about what not just your weaknesses are, but what your strengths are and what you like doing, right? So it's okay to build a team around what you love doing. I actually think what I've found is whenever I make hires, I actually am looking for people completely different than me. And I'm like, oh, this person doesn't love being in the room and talking and like going nuts, but they are so good at organizations and logistics and these things. I'm like been a blabbermouth since I was like 2 years old. So I love going into rooms and talking to people and telling them about this. And I believe in this. And I've never had a day where I'm tired of it. And probably to Will's disappointment, I will not stop. But what's so cool is that I have founders that, are so organized, so disciplined, so to the T, and they hold me accountable for those things. I really think it's important to hire around what not just you don't do well, but what you don't want to do. And so if you don't feel like you're the person that wants to be in the room trying to raise money, because that's hard, and it's an aggressive and difficult process and technical process in itself. Like, when I went to raise, I was doing 6 meetings a day. I flew to San Francisco 3 times. I was in Atlanta. It was like a numbing experience. And you need somebody that I did love it at the end of the day, right? Like, so you need somebody that loves that to that extent to be able to do it. I think for you, if you don't love that process, or if you do, right? Like, but if you don't, signing up for it might mean that you won't raise. It's that kind of thing. So it's the idea that, like, whatever you want to do, and maybe you are more on the business side, maybe you are more on the technical side, I'm not sure, but I would say look for the opposite. I would say look for that counterparty, look for the thing that you're not able to provide, especially at the early stage. If you can cover one side of it, you want somebody that can cover the other side of it, because you're anyways going to be super oversubscribed. And if there's a huge hole, then you're going to be focusing all your time on the technical side, but not have the other side represented at all. And I think I liken it to, I actually say this about artists, so it's funny to use this in this analogy. If you're like throwing a party and like you spend all this money and you get this like crazy venue, actually this is the same as the limo thing that Andy always says, so I'm kind of stealing from him there. But you get this crazy venue, you get like, the best hors d'oeuvres, like you got the cocktail weenies and whatever, those are the best. And then you get like a chocolate fondue fountain, you have like the best DJ, you have like streamers, balloons. It's like literally the heart of New York, like it's going to be the best spot. You spent all this money on it, but then you never send out invites and you don't send out flyers, and like you don't ever like put up a billboard to be like, come to my party. Like, you're going to have the nicest party in the world, like with nobody there. And so I think what I liken that to is like, if you have the technical end, to me, it's like creating a great product, but you still need people to come there for it to be used. And I would probably sacrifice a few of those frills to have somebody that can actually get people to the party. So whichever side of the coin you're on, I think it is really important to look at complementary skills.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the time. I see we're at 12:57, so I'm actually going to wrap us up for today. Shav, a huge thank you for taking the time to share your experience and your wisdom. I can tell just by the questions that were asked that this was a really great session. For those of you, if you do have any follow-up questions, you didn't get the opportunity to ask them, or if you think of them later, we'll follow up with some additional resources. We'll share Shav's contact information with you, so you can definitely follow up with any additional info that would be helpful.
Yeah.
As far as our series goes, we have just 2 weeks left, and we're going to be pivoting to think about some topics related to mission and vision and values. So next week, we'll be focused on sustainability. This is a really common topic, both from our organizations that are focused on sustainability as part of their actual product and their core service, but also from many of our teams who are really interested in understanding what does it mean to be sustainable, to really be doing your job as a business with regards to sustainability. So that'll be next week's sessions. And then the following session after that, we'll really be thinking about your mission and values at a high level and how you can go about really understanding what are the guiding principles of your business, how do you stay true to who you are, and also how do you communicate that to your constituents. So look forward to seeing many of you at those ones in the future. Thank you all so much. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shav.